At a House Transportation and Infrastructure hearing on July 23rd, Congresswoman Friedman questions acting FEMA Administrator David Richardson about the agency's response to the Texas floods.
Isn't it accurate that 80% of, at least, of the calls that went to FEMA call centers on July 7th went unanswered?
When the tragedy struck, we knew there would be
a simple yes or no question. They either answered the calls or they didn't answer the calls on July 7th.
When there was a spike in calls, FEMA was there to answer the calls. The majority of the calls were answered at the call centers.
Well, that's not what the report says. The report says that on July 5th, as the floodwaters were starting to recede, FEMA received 3,027 calls from disaster survivors and answered 3,018 of them, which is over 99%. Contractors with 4 call center companies answered the vast majority of the calls. That evening, however, Ms. Noem did not renew the contracts with those 4 companies, and hundreds of contractors were fired, according to the documents and the person briefed on the matter. The next day, July 6th, FEMA received 2,363 calls and answered 846, or roughly 35.8%, according to those documents. And on Monday, July 7th, the agency fielded 16,419 calls and answered 2,613 of them, which is only 15.9%. That's shown by official documents. And FEMA officials were incredibly frustrated by the lapse in those contracts and that it was taking days for Ms. Noem to act. A little while ago, you said that part of your job you felt was to remove, you called them bureaucratic, closing out bureaucratic procedures. To me, having someone, one person only, having to sign off on every contract of $100,000 or more is the definition of bureaucracy. And in this case, it led to thousands of victims not having their calls answered by their government. Their government wasn't there when they reached out for help in their darkest hour. So are those numbers fake? Are you telling me that those are fake numbers, or are they verifiable, and did Ms. Noem misspeak when she said that it was fake news?
What I can tell you is the vast majority of phone calls were answered. There was never a lapse in the contract. Secretary Noem, under her leadership, she's concerned about due diligence and making sure the American people get what they deserve.
So in your mind,
tax dollars.
15.9% of calls being answered is the vast majority? So is that the benchmark now we're looking for FEMA to answer their calls? 15%, or in one case, 35% in a day, in the middle of this disaster, this huge disaster?
I would have to agree with Secretary Noem. That's fake news. The majority of the calls were answered.
For more clips like this, stay tuned to Congress Clips.